Welcome back, everyone, and everyone online as well. Thank you for tuning in to the International Tea Appreciation Society's annual Victoria Tea Festival Revival. It's year 10, which is fantastic. I just wanted to say that we're all volunteers, and every merchant educator, there's 26 different merchant educators this year. Everyone's volunteering. Everyone has come from Vancouver, and they're coming from Victoria, from Up Island, and brought their tea and their knowledge and their wisdom to share with us today. So I just want to acknowledge that. And within that, on the same breath, because we're a nonprofit society, and it does take us quite a bit, and there's less funding for arts and culture as there has been over the past few years, if anybody feels inspired to donate, on the International Tea Appreciation website, there's a donation button, or at the front door. So thank you so much. I'm really stoked. We have been trying to get Victor to come to our tea festival, well, from before I even started, because I said, why isn't Westholme not here? And Jared was like, we keep asking. And so now we're just so stoked that you're here. And Westholme is, I'll let you explain, but can I tell my little story about Westholme?
Please.
So I have a small tea house on Salt Spring Island, and I teach Gong Fu tea ceremony, and everybody's welcome. And because of this, people often gift me tea, as you can imagine. And I just moved back from Europe, and a girlfriend comes up to me and she's like, "Oh, Jen, have you tried the Westholme tea?" And I'm like, "Oh no, I don't know what it is." And she said, "Oh, it's grown on Vancouver Island." I was like, "Oh, great." And trying to be nice, right? And so she gave it to me, and I kind of put it in a place where I have a lot of tea that I don't maybe drink all the time. And one day I picked it up, and it wasn't that long after, and it was fresh. It was I love fresh tea. That's something that I really enjoy, is fresh tea. So it was from your spring, and it was in that year, and I probably drank it 3 weeks after she gave it to me. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to give this a try. And it was spectacular. It blew me out of the water. It had such high chi, and as a tea drinker, after a while you really start drinking for the chi of the tea, and your tea really blew me away. And so on that note, I would love to hear a little bit about your process with tea, and if you could tell us about Westholme and your story and why you love tea and all these pieces. It would be wonderful.
It's beautiful. Thank you for that, and welcome all. Thanks for taking the time to share this. I do want to acknowledge Jared has been asking me probably for 10 years. So he succeeded in having me fail to not say no for the first time.
Yay!
So there's a bit of a theme here about success and failure. I started this endeavor in 2003, coming onto the property. And I'm going to offer you just a quick visual. I don't want to make it a presentation, just so you get a feel and a sense, a little bit of the space, because Westholme is really about the experience, your experience you've had, whether you take it away or we send tea to New York or whatnot. But I want to just give a little bit of a visual and a context for some of the successes and failures, which is what I want to share, and then have more of this, because this is the quality of exchange. I've built this business on a relationship, and there's some folks here in the room that have been to Westholme, and if you haven't been to Westholme, I want to inspire you into that experience. So if there's just a feeling for here, that first, the middle slide gives you a little sense of the scale. It's very small scale, and total currently today, there's 800 tea plants, and I'm going to take us back into the journey of. So if you could go to the next slide. The next slide is actually maybe a little bit more of a filler. You can read it or not read it, but this journey really began around a love for tea. An opportunity for me to, I am not an expert, and what I'll emphasize, I'm not an expert in any one thing, especially not in growing tea. I'm an expert in making, I do have a PhD in making mistakes, and I've made a lot of them, and that has been the journey. I chose not to go to Darjeeling to learn how to make tea, because then I would have made Darjeeling tea. I chose to sort of suffer in silence and the journey. So I'm going to take you on a little bit of that journey and hopefully leave. I'm going to make this as brief as I can, leave time for us.
This is really interesting. Thank you for preparing this. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So I will invite the next slide to take us on the journey. So the journey began, I came onto the property in 2003 from Vancouver and meandered with different concepts and different ideas, still living in Vancouver and living on the property. So we acquired a property, and you'll get a map a little bit later. So the Westholme Tea Company currently is in the Cowichan Valley between Maple Bay and Crofton, Chemainus area. And so the original concept that we had when I came on the farm was art farm. So we were growing tea, food, and art. At the time, the tea was not Camellia sinensis, which is what we planted on the slopes. It was a lavender farm, and if you know the business model of lavender, unless you're in France, you can't make money on lavender. The art was my previous co-founder and previous ex-wife, who's a ceramic artist, and we co-created the idea with her ceramics, honoring the marriage between tea and clay, and bringing tea culture to the Cowichan. So the art farm concept was her clay. It was then food. We used to grow food in the valley, and at the time, it was very difficult to promote the growing of food and the farmers markets, which are really popular now, and it's much more supported. And then the tea, as I mentioned, was flowers and herbs. We evolved in 2010 to then plant 200 Camellia sinensis and became Tea Farm, one of the first and then attempt at commercial growing of tea in Canada. And then I'll talk a little bit more about its evolution. And then the evolution 6 years later in 2016 to launch Canada's first rare terroir tea, and I'll talk a little bit about terroir and teas, and then became Westholme Tea Company. So Westholme is an area in between Maple Bay and Crofton that's actually one of the first European agricultural settlements on Vancouver Island and has a heritage and a past. So place and origin, very important to tea, so that we had to then name the local tea Westholme Tea, because if we called it Tea Farm Tea, there are tea farms all around the world, and we would have lost necessarily that connection. So that gives you a little bit, in a very brief time, sort of the evolution of 15 years of growing tea, so we're celebrating that as well, and about 18 years of the evolution of the company. If we go to the next slide. This represents the beginning. So everything was done by hand dug on the slopes. All of these slopes on the farm were all covered in blackberry, so a lot of work went into taking them out.
Oh, for
and
sure.
each magical hole was dug by hand myself. I did have some help down the road. And then we basically planted seedlings, and I'll get into more details than that. So acquired seedlings from a variety of different sources to give them a head start, because at the time, did not know if this was going to take. It was a crazy idea. Even Agriculture Canada at the time, and may still have it today, said you can't grow tea in Canada. I did not let that be a barrier. If anything, truly, it was more of a challenge. And then one of the biggest challenges, not only climate or cold or deer or pests, one of the biggest challenges is actually doubt. You know, a lot of people saying you can't do this, which eventually I turned that into many failures, but into what actually inspired me to, not to have anything to prove, but to think, what is possible? Let's explore that. I don't like homework, but I do like research, and did minimal to kind of see what is going to happen and how will it start. If we could have next slide, please. So in the first year in 2010, minus 15 was the first winter. I'm originally from Montreal. So these tea plants have been exposed to a heck of a lot. The first 2 rows of slopes, the first row was covered in, the snow was coming and the cold was coming, and no tea plants, no tea farm. No glorious moment to share the story 15 years later. Covered the first row and didn't cover the second row. The first row, when all the snow came, crushed and broke the tea leaves, whereas the second row, insulated, lesson 1 in the PhD, leave it the way it needs to be. So there was more damage when you covered it as opposed to the insulation itself of the tea. Later I discovered tea plants in Korea have been exposed, covered in snow, generally growing. Tagrotherin, which is an English tea garden in Cornwall, was one of inspirations as well, where I saw tea growing in snow there. And if they could do it at 46 and we're 48, we can explore that. So you're seeing a little bit, very briefly, sort of the seasons, winter kind of coming into spring, and then now ironically enough, some people may know that or not know, but the tea plants do actually flower. Camellia sinensis does flower this time of year. Camellia japonica, the garden variety, is in the spring, and this produces lovely yolky flowers that some of you may have already smelt. If Jasmine made love to marzipan in a vat, that's what the smell is, and I encourage you to maybe go to the booth and give it a little sniff. So I just wanted to give you a visual of the seasons and what I've had to experience. Next slide, please. Harvesting varies considerable amount. I'm not going to get into climate change and any of that discussion, but the earliest that I have harvested is in April, and the latest was June 13th, my sister's birthday. So it has varied. Again, there's different factors, the plants going through different stress, and will then choose when they want to be harvested. Next, please. Devastation. I generally don't share this, but I wanted to for interest. Not everything is always pretty and Instagrammy and whatnot. This happened in 2019, kind of around COVID-y. I won't get into energetic and whatnot, but I had done a pruning or a squaring off of the plants a bit early, and then there was a very, very heavy frost that came. But I've experienced frost before in the 15 years, but for whatever reason, the entire garden literally defoliated.
Oh, no.
And it wasn't a matter of you could get root rot and if you have poor drainage, but the plants have been draining for almost 12 years at that point, and it was devastating. Not only folks who'd been at the farm since day one, but staff who were like, what is going on? So I, in my never-ending optimism, just knew that things would come around with some love, with some care, some fertilizing, but it was just the nature of that year. A lot of people lost a lot of things, and it just was daunting. But again, in the learning of all things, the stress on the plants, the reinvigoration adds not only that. So there's one thing to grow tea plants, and there's another thing to make tea, and that's where the combination of terroir and stresses and natural factors, kind of like grapes and wine. So I wanted to share this picture, which I don't usually, but it was the scale of it was daunting with 800 tea plants. It was quite devastating. But
Yeah,
we came around, and now they're quite gorgeous, or more so if we go to the next slide. I don't know if that creates a little contrast, but picture on the right is some harvest, and the picture on the left is that original terrace that you first saw with the holes, and that's me having the great privilege of standing in those tea plants. So yeah, I get a little emotional. Daunting to be part of tea culture and tea history in some small, humble way that the tea plants have actually taken far beyond my capacity and learning and ability, and the learning of people visiting, both tea makers and tea growers from around the world who've been curious, have provided constructive critique, and have helped me to continue to fumble through the tea teaching me what it wants and how it needs to thrive and thrive. Next one, please. Very briefly, I won't get into a whole workshop about tea making, but what fascinates some people who may not be as knowledgeable in tea, obviously a lot of folks in this room are, all tea comes from the same plant, and how its process determines whether it becomes a green tea by extremes of no oxidization and black tea fully, where in between you have white tea and oolongs, which I originally did make some oolongs, but I just wanted to give a visual that I have the great privilege of within the 800 tea plants that I have to then create at different times of the year, different tea styles, and that is represented there a little bit in a bit of a close-up. And I can talk a little bit about the tea that we're featuring today and over at the booth. So I just wanted to give that visual. And then I want to move along quickly. I'm really honoring time and all that. If we could have the next slide, please. So out of that oxidization, we've then developed, again, all from the same tea plants, the green tea. The tree frog is a tea that I only do from the first 200 tea plants, the original oldest tea plants. In the spring, it's Essentia steamed green tea style, which has quite a loving following and does leave the farm rather quickly. As the summer evolves, the white tea, I call white mist, is a beautiful fine bud and two-leaf tea that evolves as things warm up. Then I will evolve into the Heron's Wake, which took me 9 years. It took 9 years before I was comfortable as, if I can say the word, artist, to actually share what I love. And I wasn't ready to share the Heron's Wake until I truly really loved it and have. And it's this year is probably one of the finest harvests in that I harvested very little, and as a result, the teas have been very full and very flavorful. And then the roasted teas, which we're featuring today here, Quail's Plume, which is my very rustic, very humble Canadian version of a hojicha, which is a twig and leaf, pan-roasted. And then just to kind of throw a little Canadiana in it, anything sort of maple tends to be quite popular. I take the exact same Quail's Plume tea, and then I cold maple smoke it, and that usually comes a little bit later in the year, and it has an essence of Canadiana, and it's still an ode. So it's a Canadian-made tea in a Japanese style, and an ode to Lapsang, smoking it with maple chips. My version of hoo-ha. Then occasionally I'll create some unique and different tea maker reserves that I'm working on as well too. So I don't want to, again, overwhelm us with too much information, but I just wanted to give you a scope as well of what I'm able to create in very small quantities, all hand harvested by myself and the team. And that's the tea. Could we have next, please? So Westholme is many things. It is a place to visit and experience that you can come to the Cowichan. We have a tea shop, which again, part of the breadth of the business is we do import teas from all around the world and honor the tea culture and the tea growers and who makes it where they do, and we feature that and also create unique blends with our teas. We're quite unique in that we don't use any essences or flavorings at all in our teas. And the tea shop, which at one point was, and you got to experience as well, a tea room. We've evolved after COVID into offering more space and retail, although we still offer tours where you can come and enjoy during the May to September season, where we do actually sit down and taste the Canadian teas and complement it with some pairings. And then we do have as well a gift gallery that features local ceramic artists and Cowichan tea cozies, which I brought one along. The Cowichan knit sweater is very true to the area that we're in, and we combined our tea culture and got Maud Jo to then create the cozies that honor both our tea and the space that we're in. So that's just a very brief, wanted to give you a sense of who Westholme is. I'm happy to, we're going to explore a little bit more. This maybe inspires some questions, obviously from you as well, but I just wanted to give you a breadth of what the experience is. And if you go to the last picture, we can leave that up. If folks aren't familiar with where we're located, that is the place, and our website will guide you there as well. I hope that wasn't a rant, but I'm quite passionate about the sharing it, and again, truly grateful to everyone at the, both folks who've come to arrive, Jared for inviting me, Mark for being so diligent, yourself for being here, and I'm going to stop talking right now.
It's great to lay out a beautiful foundation to see all the work and care and time that you've put into creating something that wasn't possible, right? And you did it, and I think it's true. You learn a lot from mistakes, and you learn a lot from perseverance. And I'm curious to know a little bit more about your tea bushes and how you came across. You said that the initial bushes were from seed?
No, seedlings.
Oh, seedlings. Okay,
yeah.
okay.
So I chose to get a bit of a head start.
How did you know which seedlings to use?
So in not doing the homework, but doing a little bit of the research, of exploring a lot of varietals.
Yes.
I came across the Sochi, which a lot of people know Sochi as a very robust. The initial criticism I got was like, oh, you're using Sochi, you're never going to make good tea out of it. I think the risk in was, let's go with something that would be a bit more resilient, that's already tried, true, and tested, and then eventually I'll expand on that and diversify and so forth. But I was quite thrilled. In all of the 800, I've probably lost maybe 3 or 4 plants in that. So they've held up well. Again, with the southern exposure, some good luck. But that was what I essentially started with.
Okay.
So I had the great pleasure of just calling up Brian Minter, who's a renowned, Vancouver, and he was quite thrilled, and it was neat to kind of explore, and so he's able to source some initially. Then then Bernie Dinter on Vancouver Island, and then a few other sources. I've stuck mostly with the Sochi varietal. Some of the other ones didn't. I experimented a little bit, weren't quite as resilient. So I'm still going to be expanding. We have acquired property that we're planning on planting more, and I'm still in that stage of kind of determining where. I've had visitors from Korea who have offered up some Korean seedlings, which I'm going to explore and try to diversify a little bit. And I enjoyed that initial criticism, like, you can't make decent tea with Sochi. I've quite comfortable in the 15 years that the tea has established itself, that it's very much Cowichan cultivar. And this is actually the first time that I've offered up seeds. So we're actually selling seeds for the first time because I'm really confident that the seeds will take. They're very, very fresh. Most times when you purchase seeds, they're going to get shipped from somewhere else. And so we're excited about that experiment. I'm not an expert in growing tea from seed, so I'm going to leave that to others. But yeah, that was kind of the first foray into what's going to work, and let's kind of
I like the way you called it a Cowichan tea, because the terroir with the soil and the rain and the local environment really is making it your own.
Yeah, again, extremes. We had that heat dome. I don't like that term, but about 3 or 4 years ago, 43-degree weather. And I've lived in a variety of different hot places, but it was like blurry. It was just blurry, and the tea plants. I had just planted the youngest ones, which were planted in 2015. So I should say planted 200 in 2010. In 2014, another 400, and then in 2015, another 200. Kind of spreading things out, and the newest plants suffered the most, but then they again recuperated. So yeah.
Oh, fantastic. I think the first time I came to Westholme it would have been 2017 when I first moved back to the Pacific Northwest, and it was wonderful to see the plants flourishing. So you were saying that you're mostly self-taught, and have you traveled to different regions to meet with farmers and learn different techniques? Do you have some mentors that you work with?
I kind of did it in reverse. So I did, after university, I went to Japan, and that's what kind of immersed in tea culture. Not necessarily the ceremony of it, but just everywhere you'd go, you'd have, it's an invitation. It brings people together, and that
100%.
remains at the core of Westholme and sharing of tea and being steeped in nature. So I had experience not on actual farms, and then traveled through China a little bit later. So I was always exposed to it, but never really pursued it because I never thought of putting on the tea farmer hat until very much later. So ironically, and I've been trying not to sound obnoxious at all in this process, but been interesting to have tea growers from Assam. I've had Taiwanese. I've had folks from Cuba who are actually growing tea.
Oh, amazing.
There's a lovely person, Big Island Tea from Hawaii. So I've had a lot of folks come to see what I'm actually doing. What is this a novelty? Is it for real? So that's been kind of the way I've been learning in that way. And there really hasn't been a lot of mentorship. I mean, I think the traditional way is family, generation to generation, pass along information. There is a lot, but not a lot to learn on how to make tea and grow. So it's really been truly me, somewhat in isolation. Again, not saying no for the last 10 years and not even coming here. So I've been sort of doing things on my own, in my own sort of way. And again, kind of learning through mistakes and learning more intuitively to what would work. So there's science, there's technology around machinery and so forth. Everything I do is all done by hand.
Okay, that was my next
question. And so there's a science around oxidization that has to be very specific. But I've done things differently enough to make it interesting enough that a lot of tea makers are like, how did you do that? So that there's an onus on maybe innovation by not knowing. This will sound obnoxious officially, and I hope it's not being recorded. So Picasso could paint because Picasso could draw. I've never learned how to draw. I've just been painting. Now I want to eventually at some point go into the technicality of it. But I'm enjoying and feel comfortable enough and love the tea enough to then share it with the world. And so that's in some way more artistry than maybe science and technology.
No, and I think there's great humility in the fact that you said that you take feedback from people that come to your farm and try your teas and ask how you did it, and then maybe they give advice from there and what works. And there's that exchange, and that also I think really helps develop your own Cowichan style of tea.
Yes, very rustic.
No, rustic is wonderful. I
Yeah.
think that's what tea traditionally was originally. You know, you would have some tea bushes in your backyard, and you would make some for your family, and over time, tribute teas. It builds. But I think it's really lovely that you're doing it. So you've had some challenges. I like how you were transparent with that because it's not easy. You know, I've traveled extensively throughout Asia, going to tea farms and meeting tea farmers. It's not an easy job. You know, we can sit here and glorify it, and we're seeing the beautiful photos, but it's hard work. You're out there in all the elements, like you said. You have a team, obviously, but you're out there picking and processing. And can you tell us a little bit about your process? So you're picking the tea in your window of April to June, and so you only do one harvest a year?
No, so I should qualify. That's the first harvest.
Okay.
So the tea plants are dormant throughout the winter.
Yes.
Then they do what's called flushing out,
Yes.
which is what we were seeing there. The first harvest, I usually focus entirely on the first 2 rows, the tree frog green.
Yes.
Inspired by the Pacific tree frog, because when on the farm, when the resonant sound is so overwhelming, it's usually a harbinger for the tea coming around. So hand harvested the fine buds and the leaves, steamed to stop the oxidization process, hence green tea. Then heavily rolled, bruised and manipulated to pull the oils from the stem to the leaf to the flower. And then I wok finish it. So it's a kind of a Korean style sencha. So very small quantities, but it's something I want to eventually share at some point, because if anyone hasn't smelled fresh tea being steamed, it's almost sensual and
intoxicating,
almost erotic. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
So I get the
intoxicating.
great privilege of being erotic by myself, but I would love to share
Yeah.
share that beyond. So again, very small harvest, very small batch, everything done by hand. And then as the summer evolves, then some plants will kind of lessen with the heat, and then there will be a summer flush.
Okay.
So then there's another, depending on rainfall, heat, warmth. And then ironically enough, just last week, with the change in weather and the rains and then the warmth, I was able to actually do a smaller fall harvest, which is a little bit more unusual. So again, similar to Darjeeling, where you have the first flush and you have second, you have monsoon season. Ours is a little bit similar in that way versus Sri Lanka, where all year you're harvesting all year. So it's really, again, a matter of I can't push the plants to produce.
No.
And so honoring and watching. 800 plants, again, does not produce a tremendous amount of tea. So we generally do about 36 or 38 kilos of fresh tea leaf, which usually gets reduced to about 60 to 80%. So you're about 18, 16 kilos is not a lot
No.
of tea. However, this year was even less because colder winter, and I needed to let the plants regenerate a bit more, and so the harvest came a little bit later, but I was really, really kind of thrilled with it. I feel like I'm on a tangent away
No, it's
from
great.
your
No, it's great. I
question,
think
yeah.
it's wonderful because I'm really inspired by the fact that you make it all by hand, because one of my ethos in sourcing tea and working with tea is I love to buy artisan tea because it's a tradition, and with the mass growing of tea and how the industry has shifted and how more and more people love tea, that ancient tradition of picking by hand, rolling by hand, making by hand, all the thousands of different varieties of tea that you can make with these processes of experimentation over millennia. And so with you doing that, I think that's one step towards helping to keep that tradition alive. And so I hope that you're able to remain small, because I think there's something really beautiful in the craftsmanship and the artisanship of taking care and making something of quality and not quantity. And with that comes the taste and the chi that was really obvious to me. So I think that's wonderful.
It's
Yeah, please.
a bit of a tangent.
Yeah,
as well.
go.
No, it's interesting you say that, because I haven't So I haven't tested the tea for both caffeine levels or antioxidant levels and so forth. May explore to do that down the road. But there's something that happens. Again, we do import teas. Our team has a great privilege of understanding and actually plucking tea. So when they drop tea from Ceylon or Sri Lankan tea, they have a different relationship with understanding what it takes to actually do the tea. So there's a reverence for it as well too. But we find that, I mean, you mentioned it, Chi, that whenever we do drink the Canadian tea, there is a different effect.
Oh, 100%.
On us, whether it's maybe higher caffeine levels, but it's definitely maybe either the freshness, I won't say it's the tea making, but there is something that happens that's very, very different, and I think as a result
Yeah, it's
of a
very
lot
noticeable.
of factors. Yeah.
And I think that you can't have a lot of quantity for artisan teas. You know, a lot of these farmers, to make the amount that you would need to sell to make money to sustain yourself is almost impossible. So I think it's really great that you have your artisan and then you have your other tea that is fulfilling a need and also can enable you to keep doing what you love and cultivating your art. And it's like 10,000 hours. It sounds like you've put it in.
Feels like it.
Yeah. So did you bring some tea for us to drink?
Well, yeah. Again, in honoring the cozy. So this is the buoyancy of that. So Hojicha style, so that when the plants are skiffed or trimmed, which I do use an electric, not a gas anymore. So I then gather and then hand sort and then roast the tea. So this essentially is highly oxidized first off, so it is a green tea. But then the twigs and the leaf are very similar, again, to the traditional style of Hojicha. And so you can kind of see, again, the liquor. I don't know if folks can see from a distance how that holds. And allowed it to steep fully here because it won't necessarily oversteep. Lower in caffeine because, again, there's more caffeine in the leaf than in the twig. And then as a roasted tea, I think offers more of a fall kind of flavor profile. Some folks in the room, I think, may have already tasted it. So we're not tempting you, but we can share. There's more happening. I broke some rules as well. I was told that you can't pre-prepare tea at the tea festival, but I did steep some cold quail's plume, just because I like breaking rules and obviously breaking a lot of rules. But you can try some of it either hot or cold at the booth as well too. So I shouldn't. Can I pour you some in your cup? I was going to keep a cup for Mark.
Oh yeah,
here.
please. Thank
Okay?
you, Mark. Yeah,
'cause
great.
Mark, I promised that I was going to give Mark his version of
thank
it
you.
too. But I'm going to start with you.
Thank you.
So we don't have a lot of formality at Westholme in terms of what is a Canadian tea style, how do we do it, and honoring all traditions. We've kind of evolved and sort of developed our whatever is casual and approachable. So when we do our tours, a lot of people are expecting some sort of ritual. Ours is still kind of evolving. I really want people to be comfortable in the moment, explore, and enjoy tea. Mark, I'm going to get you to come and run over here and enjoy that.
I think that's a really massive part of contemporary society is we need more not dogmatic ways to come together and create modern ceremony with just presence and enjoyment of a simple leaf. And the beauty is you've crafted it, and then we can all come and share it together and have conversation. It's my favorite thing to do.
So your cup is not half full, and if it's not half empty, but if you are thirsty for life, we are definitely in the right place. Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. True pleasure.
Oh wow.
It's not quite as hot. as
No,
it
but
needs to be.
it's perfect for drinking, and I'm getting notes of cacao. It's really nice to drink darker roasted teas in the fall because they're really warming for the body. And it's lovely to have these teas, especially as it gets farther into winter and it gets darker earlier and we get tired earlier. And to have a nice digestive tea like this after dinner and curl up in front of the fire with a book is a really enjoyable way to spend an afternoon.
So when I cold smoke, so I use the maple chips, and I use the exact same tea just to smoke it. The maple flavor doesn't come through. It's more of that smoky. Maple's a lot sweeter than Lapsang Souchong, which is generally a pine smoked black tea. So that's part of the inspiration came. but the maple won't necessarily appear on the palate. But when the cup empties and dries, there's a sweetness and a maple smell, which is kind of trippy and
Yeah,
kinda
I'm getting a
weird.
really nice undernote of sweetness as well.
Mm.
Does anybody have any questions?
Oh wow, great question. It wasn't until sort of maturing and probably within about two or so years, which I didn't pay a lot of attention to, and all of a sudden they were there. They were quite so. They were seedlings about a year, some year seedlings. So they within that frame, yeah, it's 3 4 years. Yeah, yeah. And again, some seasons like this season, it's already started a little bit early, and seeding is a whole other issue. And some years not flowered at all. So the frost, yeah, the frost will come, and if they're in that budding stage, and there's a variety of factors, not necessarily rain and so forth, but 2 years ago I didn't have any flowering at all. The flowers generally aren't necessarily interwoven into either flavoring or tea and so forth, but we do sell them as a botanical to Sheringham Distillery that uses them, and the Canadian tea, very rough version of it in their tea, in their gin called Beacon. Originally it was called Kazuke, and then they made it more Victoria local. So we have a great pleasure of working with them, but they didn't get any that year, so that was a little challenging. So there's again a whole application which we've explored in the past. There's a whole culinary aspect to having tea and fresh tea leaves. We briefly, I think, chatted before. Vietnam, fresh tea leaves are drank as tea, where they don't necessarily process the tea. We've done some innovative things at the farm in the past where we had were actually dried tea leaves and had them dipped them in chocolate, and they actually, like a prosciutto, would be crispy and chocolatey, and we actually featured that at one of the, I'm giving away all my best ideas, at the Feast of Fields. And then there's a lot of, again, applications. So we actually sold fresh tea leaves at the farmer's market, and kind of like grapes. Here's some grapes. You can make wine if you want to, or you can crush them and make grape juice. And a lot of culinary applications where you could steam them and put them in. One of the things that we did, one of the staff, Shauna, who's been with us for 12 years now, she's amazing, and had a great idea where you could actually take the tea leaves instead of basil and make a pesto with tea leaves, put that on a salmon. If there's nothing more West Coast than that.
Yeah, that's exquisite. That's lovely. Thank you, please.
Yeah.
And so when are you open if people want to come visit?
Yes, Wednesday through Sunday, 10 a.m. To 4 p.m., so somewhat limited hours. We, again, feature our tea shop where you can explore the world of tea and adventure. As you drive down through the farm, you'll be driving through the tea garden. We don't necessarily encourage folks to go on the slopes, so we kind of limit that, but certainly when we have guided tours, then you have the great privilege and intimacy of being on the slopes, which again often becomes a unique experience in that you're surrounded by tea plants, and sometimes when the fog and the mist comes in, you could be anywhere in the tea world, but you're in Canada, so it's quite unique.
And I think that's a really good point, because not everybody has the opportunity to go to Asia and have that moment of the scent of the morning mist on the tea leaves. It's, there's a definite ambiance and feeling of being amongst the tea. And so thank you for bringing that to the West Coast and making it more accessible for everyone. Yeah. And is there any more questions?
How are we?
Yay, I love questions. Oh, two, great. Yes, please.
I have 2 questions just about the bushes and how they grow. I've seen them from a train by, and
Delicious.
and they grow like in
Hedges.
rounded, is that just, if you could talk about that maybe a little bit. And I was just wondering, do the plants actually, do they send up runners?
Yeah. No, great question. Different techniques, different styles. A lot of that rounding is because a lot of machinery or robotics, or they use machinery which creates a beautiful form, and that's exquisite. That was initially my challenge in the beginning or making mistakes or lack of knowledge. So I had let some of the first two rows just go wild, where you're supposed to prune and shape and do all that. So Dang Kong, known as the one stem or the one tree style, which is kind of the ideal. So I've had a lot of people visit and go, what the hell are you doing, right? So again, in the experiment of things, what's going to produce more? So discovered many years later that the ones that went wild Canadian, don't know what I'm doing, produce more than the Dang Kong, the 2015s that I did all one tree. So then to qualify, Camellia sinensis is a tree. It's an actual tree but in an agricultural context kept as a bush for harvesting. But UN protected areas in China, 1,200-year-old trees will grow and extend, and all of that. I think my understanding the oldest tea tree is like 3,600 years old. So
about 3,600 years old, and it's massive. Picture like a huge sort of madrona with, like 40 meters high, like beautiful. Beautiful.
The one regret that I do have, and it just came up lately, is that I never left one just be, like never touch it, so that what would it be? So I regret that a little bit, but I have few regrets. I'm pretty good at that.
You could maybe plant a rogue one, right, this year, and then maybe over time, in generations to come, possibly you'll have a nice old growth.
So I hope I kind of answered your question. There was no right way for me to figure out, but I've discovered that the rustic or the wild approach has served me more betterer. I've always been not like against how it should be done, but I've always been sort of like, well, how can I do it, and what will the effect be? It's not about really breaking the rules, and not making new rules, but trying to understand how do they want to be, like how do they want to be controlled or not controlled, and how will they produce and taste and all of that.
And this is a beautiful point about artisan tea making. You have the luxury of being able to listen to the tea. You have the luxury of having this communion with the tea. So it can be like, no, I just want to grow free and have these expansive arms where, if you're I've got to make tea this way, this is what's supporting my way of life, then you've got to produce a lot more. And so I really admire that you have this as your art,
thank you.
because it's something that we need more of in the world today. People that are making and crafting and creating for passion and for taste and for sharing. You had a question.
Oh.
Around them.
Oh.
I was curious if you'd ever experimented with anything like that, where you could access all sides of the bush.
Initially, it was the first 2 rows very singular, and then I did sort of a striation where it would be wider and more accessible and create more of a what we call tableau. I in the lower section, it's a bit more rounded and so forth, but I did somewhat stick to the traditional, not traditional. So the first 2 rows were planted, and then people come and they're expecting to see like a vineyard, like rows and rows and rows. So I tell this story occasionally. So I had a buddy of mine shows up with 3 hours of demo time on excavator, and I'd done the first 2 rows by hand, and it was hard. So he said, I got 3 hours, what do you want to do? I said, well, if we had another 3rd row, it would start looking like a tea farm.
Yeah.
And he said, wait, let me do this. So instead of giving you 160 feet, I'm going to give you 380. And he did this herringbone, which is what you would have seen in the original. So we ended up being better real estate, although the tea plants are still spread out quite a bit in the experiment. How is this going to work? So instead of 160, instead of 1 more terrace, I got a row of 8 more and 300 and tripled. And then a lot of the farmers who would come and go, why are you doing it like that? And I said, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but it seems to be working out, because those worked really well. So I did start clumping them in the lower section, so you can walk around them, and that's been both practical for staff to pluck, and then visually there's an aesthetic to it too, that I think is part of the art form, or part of what's welcoming in that way. So it's not all linear and so forth. Now, granted, on the new property, I'll probably be practical and do that. And have some rows so people are like.
What's
'cause
your
it's-
vision with the new property? What are you thinking? What's the long-term arc?
Well, it's going. So I've had a lot of visitors actually from higher elevation Chinese who
Yeah.
tell me that a lot of the there's no estates on obviously private land, but that there are farmers generation to generation who have 2,000 plants, about 2,000 plants, and they're highly sought after as tea makers. And a lot of people who've seen that model, when they
Yes.
come to Westholme, they go, this is almost exactly like they doing it in the smaller areas and trying to, so another 1,000 plants to get us at around 1,800 or 2,000 plants would be a comfortable number where I don't have to then start to mechanize
Yeah.
and can still invite and train more people and staff and have maybe more workshopping and engage more folks to help with that, but then to keep it very intimate and very
Yeah,
very
still
small.
handmade.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
And again, that's a
And it also gets your tea out there. Allows
Yeah.
more people to drink the tea and
yeah.
and share, and because right now, unless you know about Westholme and it's not, you can't buy it anywhere else but directly through you.
Yeah, and through
So-
the website. We don't necessarily, other than Sheringham and Botanilos, don't wholesale the tea at this point, just because the direct sales are obviously, for obvious reasons, are direct. But it's something I do. I do want to share the love. And again, it is still an experiment, too, or a representation of not necessarily fair trade, but the tea is at a premium. Part of the fascinating thing is in the early days when I was, starting and launching the tea, so the rare tea collectors don't take me seriously enough because I'm not expensive enough, and then a lot of folks locally have a coronary when they see the price of the tea. So it's kind of this weird little dance. But at the end of the day, it represents take very good care of staff and all that nature, and it's representative of what's comparable. And a tea can be steeped 3 or 4 or 5 times. There's value in that, and there's an essence to
100%.
it. And supporting a local crazy endeavor is I'm so appreciative and privileged to bring this to the tea world and have the tea world come and be part of it. And that's why I'm really excited about being here today and
Yeah,
really
thank you
appreciate
for coming.
and all of this.
It's been very insightful. I'm glad you could make it. It's been lovely getting to know you and chatting today. And are there any more questions? Okay.
I hope we're not.
No,
going too-
we're perfect. This has been great, and I wish you much luck.
Thank you.
And I'm really grateful for the work you're doing. And we need more people making artisan teas and sharing in the world, especially here on the Pacific Northwest,
Good.
and taking risks and loving it and enjoying it. So thank you.
Thanks. It's
And
been
everyone, if you can get a chance, please head out to Westholme and go for a walk. It's wonderful. You also, I sign up to your newsletter, and there's often different events that you can join in on. I've noticed some like food pairing events. And so please, people can sign up to the website off the westhometea.com and get all the information you need from the newsletter. And please go and support our local tea farmer here on the West Coast.
Thank you all. Thanks.
Thank you.
Privilege. Thanks very much. Thank you.